you. A big thank you to all our sponsors for putting this together. And I'm going to move very, very fast through my time with you. And the clanking of your dessert spoons tells me you're still awake. All right. I want to talk to you today about community, dynamic community, where things are vibrant, where people feel lifted up, where it seems as though lives are being changed for the better, where there's stories of success, not shootings, prosperity, not poverty. And that's the theme of what I want to share with you today, because the question becomes, how do we get there? How do you as a community get to a point where things are truly, truly prosperous? That's what we all want. The question is, how do we get there? And I've had the fortune of attending events like this in several cities around the country, from Durham, North Carolina, to Jacksonville, and everywhere in between. And having watched communities go from, let's say, plateaued to explosive, vibrant growth, I've had a chance to see some patterns emerge. You just I'm not an academician, I'm not a scientist, but you just observe things and you see trends. So what I want to do is help you see some of the trends I've seen, and I'm going to have you assess for yourself where your community lies as we go through these 7 trends that I believe indicate there's impending prosperity around the corner. The kind of prosperity that'll blow your mind. All right, so let's start with the first one. There's a passion in these communities within the people for where they live. Now, I'm not saying, oh, my town is okay. There's a passion. People feel like there's a quality of life. I like saying I belong to this town. There's a pride of belonging. I'll tell you this, my wife and I have had a chance to live in Illinois in the suburbs, and we've had a chance to live in Texas in the suburbs. I will tell you, there's very few people in the suburbs of Illinois who are proud to live in Illinois. We all look at each other a lot and go, why do you live here again? And why do you live here again? But when we lived in Texas, people were militantly excited about where they lived. And it didn't matter what the economy was doing. It didn't matter what was going on around them. It was just, we're proud to be where we're from. So assess for yourself as you think about your community, especially those of you that have grown up here. Is there some of that in the blood of your area? Here's the next one. There's a clear recognition in these breakthrough communities that our best days are still ahead. There's a respect for where we've come from and the past legacy businesses, the past legacy things that have been accomplished. There's a healthy respect for those traditions, but there's an embracing of all these new breakthroughs that are happening in the community. So I want you to think about this as you assess your community. If you think 5 years ago versus today, do you find yourself looking back 5 years ago saying, well, if I was to take my temperature 5 years ago versus today, do I feel better about our future now than I did 5 years ago? Are there some things happening that suggest to me that there's some really amazing things about to happen? Here's the next one. Innovative leadership. Usually, in towns and areas where explosive, great things happen, there's innovators at the leadership level. In politics, who come in and say, we're going to do things a little differently. There's innovators in a community like yours, in the academic community, in the business community, where business owners, entrepreneurs come together and say, look, it's great for us to make money ourselves, and we have these thriving, successful businesses of our own that provide wonderful lifestyles for our family, but listen, it's time for us as business owners, it's time for us as the academic community, it's time for us as the politicians to come together for something bigger than ourselves. And when you hear that happening, when you sense that in your marketplace, it's one of the trends I've seen that lay the foundation for incredible growth to follow. Here's what's next. There's a coming together of a lot of key players in the marketplace under a shared vision. So part of that involves laying down of some barriers. So if you look back in your city and in your county, if you can look back to a time where there were little fiefdoms, hey, this group did their thing, and this group did their thing, and this group did their thing, and we were kind of nice to each other, but we kind of really did our thing. And if you now look at what's happening in your community and you see that changing, if you see a momentum building where walls are coming down, collaboration is starting, and there's a shared vision for where you want to take your community, I would suggest to you that is a key trait of a community that's on the verge of something great. I just heard yesterday, I had a chance to go to dinner with some of the chamber board members, and it was electric in the room, being around them as they were describing how South Bend and Elkhart and the universities are all starting to come together with a shared vision that probably didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. That to me indicated a big check mark on my little list here. Here's the next one. I call them magic moments. For the entrepreneurs in the room, and for those of you that work in entrepreneurial companies, even for those of you that are in the academic community, the bankers in the room, the lawyers in the room, you're around these entrepreneurs. A lot of people will look at successful anything and say, oh, well, they just got lucky. Right? And the entrepreneurs in the room would say, well, if you had any idea. But I think most entrepreneurs would agree that luck had a little bit to do with it. You had to put in the blood, you had to put in the sweat, you had to put in the tears, you had to prepare yourself for the moments, but then some magical things did happen. A phone call came in from that special customer. A deal got put together that opened some huge doors. Something happened that really took a company from here to there. And so I would have you think about it that way and say, are there some magical, almost miracle-like things happening in your community that were bigger than any one of you? It's not something that any one of you could have pulled off, but some combination of a bunch of you and the timing has led to some really interesting things happening. How many of you are popcorn fans in the room? Yes? Have you ever watched popcorn pop? It starts with a single kernel popping, and then you'll hear a pop pop, and then really nothing for a few seconds, and you'll hear a pop pop pop, and then really nothing again, and then pop 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 pop, and then it just doesn't stop, and everything blows over. I want you to picture that in your mind as you think about vibrant communities and things coming together. I want you to think about things that are happening in your community now and ask yourself, are there some popcorn kernels popping? I heard yesterday about the RDA grant. It's about a $42 million investment into this marketplace. I also heard about the fact that as a research university, Notre Dame's research budget may be going from a $50, $80 million a year budget to what could be a $600, $700 million budget. I don't know if you hear it, but I hear popcorn kernel popping. And it takes a series of them, but the last thing you want to do is when you hear the popcorn starting to pop is you turn the stove off. Right? You go, okay, we had a couple pops, let's just eat the 2 kernels that popped. You want to keep that heat going. You want to wait and anticipate even greater things to come. I would say those magic moments that your community is starting to experience tells me from the experience I've had looking at lots of communities, they don't have this going on. They hope for these kinds of things, they wish for these kinds of things, but it's happening in your backyard right now. All right. What's next? A couple more. You and I don't have to be mega statisticians, we don't have to be research scientists to know if things are starting to happen in our community. Just walk into a local restaurant. Think about restaurants in your community 5 years ago and walking into those same restaurants today. Are they busier? Is there a little bit more of a buzz? Is there a little bit more activity? That should tell you something. Think of the trades 5, 6, 7 years ago. Were they sitting around looking for work versus today? Are they busy? Is manufacturing clamoring for more jobs? Are they almost running out of talent, going, we need more talent, we need more talent? That should tell you and me that just basic market indicators that you and I can just look at very intuitively and go, something's going on. Something's different here. And then the final one I would say to you is that I've noticed as a trend in breakthrough communities right before they break through is intrinsic geographical, technology, talent, or tax advantages. And I would suggest to you that if you went down that list of the words I just used, you have them all. Do you know, I just found out yesterday that your property taxes aren't too bad. Do you know that for a home that most of you live in, if you were to take that same home and put it in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, you'd be paying between $12,000 and $18,000 a year in taxes? Now, I hear that there's a train line coming. There's some interesting things getting developed. why wouldn't someone move to a marketplace that they could get to the city within 90 minutes or less, leave a high tax, high burden, high cost of living market, and why would they not consider at some point moving and living a wonderful lifestyle? I would say that yesterday when Sally and I heard that for what we pay in taxes, we could be at 20% of that, we looked at each other and went, Now, it doesn't take a lot of hmms in the marketplace for some real magic to happen in a community like this. You're in a transportation thoroughfare. You know that, right? I found out and I've learned that there's 50 miles of dark and lit fiber within just your county. That's unheard of. When Google decided to lay some fiber in one neighborhood in Chicago, the property values went up 30%. And they just came and dropped one little line. You've got 50 miles of it right here waiting. 4.1% unemployment, and manufacturers clamoring for more and more talent. So I guess the question I have for you is, as you assess your community, I've assessed your community, I've got my personal opinion about it, but would you say our best years, our best days are behind us? Are we always going to kind of be in Chicago and Indy's shadow, or is something much bigger about to happen here? So the question becomes, well, what do we need to do? What do you, this group of people, you really are the engine of this marketplace, I'm going to assume. So what can you do, what do you and I need to be thinking about to make sure that these few popcorn kernels that are popping don't lead us to turn off the stove and they keep popping more and more? So first one, I would say, is you as a marketplace, you as a community need to get a BHAG. Now, does everyone know what a BHAG is? It's a highly technical term. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? It's very, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate to you very quickly how powerful it can be, because let's look at the universities in this marketplace. 40,000 students between the few universities in this area. That's a rich, rich marketplace. But if the universities set their goal to say, we want to do more research, we want to provide greater education in the marketplace, that's a great goal. And if the business community that's represented here say, hey, we want to create more jobs, we want to create more vibrant economy, that's a great goal. If the politicians say we want to make this a great place for people to live, we want to reduce costs, we want to attract more and more people to live here, that's a great goal. But I would suggest to you that all those sit at this level, and far above it is a goal that all those feed that you as a community need to figure out what that is. And when you find it, you'll encapsulate it in a set of words that fires you all up. Can I prove to you how powerful that is? Let's talk political presidential cycles, all right? No one get upset. But I'm going to demonstrate to you the power of not just having a big, hairy, audacious goal, but galvanizing it into something, I call it a win theme, that everyone gets excited about. Presidential cycle 2 cycles ago, those 2 words differentiated President Obama from his competition. Mitt Romney had a lot of ideas. He had a lot of fans. But he was never able to coalesce what he was about in something that people could get on the bandwagon for, so to speak. Hope and change won President Obama the election. Now, you would say, well, no, Joe. President Obama had a lot more to him than that. It's not just 2 words. Okay, well, look at the next presidential cycle. A win theme that represented a lot of different things but coalesced into one common thought that grabbed the attention of a group of people and said, we buy into that, right? One group of people bought into hope and change, a different group of people bought into make America great again. The point being that a leader in each case was able to find a statement that everyone could buy into, and it coalesced a lot of people to come together. So the university system has some great goals. The business community has some great goals. The political community has some great goals. When we can figure out that one goal that supersedes all of us, we'll know, because it'll almost bring a tear to your eye when you see it. It'll keep you up, it'll get your heart rate going a little bit, and it may even keep you up at night. Because you would have found something about your community that's worth fighting for and worth putting in the effort for. So, the first thing is, you got to do this. Find that big, hairy, audacious goal. And I know your chamber leadership team is going to start working on that very, very soon, because I encouraged them to do that yesterday. They may tap a lot of you on the shoulder to help in that process. Next one. And somebody here or a group of you here are going to have to get absolutely sold out passionate about building the youth in this community. I'm going to tell you something. When you look at any community, South Bend and the surrounding area being no different, there's always a group of people who are borderline to below poverty lines, and there's a great sense of hopelessness in those communities. And all of us may have different views on how we can change that. Let's fund things, let's donate things, let's put programs together. I would say to you, my experience has found that nothing fires up a parent, even the poorest parent, than if you can change their kid's life. So, how do we do that? Well, you can do it through education, true. But how many of you in this room are like me? The educational system really wasn't your thing. Like, I was a horrible student. And if it was just about good teachers providing good education, I would have missed the boat a long time ago. But somehow, some way, entrepreneurship was introduced as part of being a young person. So imagine if in our local schools, even in the poorest neighborhoods we have, rather than go write checks, we just showed up and gave them opportunities to do something entrepreneurial or teach them about how to be an entrepreneur. What if we took youth sports and made it an integral part of our communities, something that all of us in some way get behind? Because I can tell you, youth sports changes lives when it's done right. Entrepreneurship, youth sports, and the trades. Most schools don't have the money, they don't have the resources to bring trades into the school system. But I'm going to tell you, I'm seeing in communities where leaders like you say, how do we make that happen? How do we bring entrepreneurship into our schools or around our schools as club programs? How do we bring youth sports? And how do we bring the trades into these schools? What happens is, even the most underprivileged families start seeing their kids transform, take initiative, fall in love with something. Right? For me, I came from a third world country. I'm an immigrant. And for me, entrepreneurship was my way out. A lot of you are big fans of your former Heisman Trophy winner, Tim Brown, right? Youth sports was his way out. I had a chance to work with Tim on a couple of businesses he launched, and his brother, Don, who's kind of his mentor, they always tell the story of growing up. Every single day, Don would take Tim, his little brother, in the backyard and fire footballs at him as hard as he could till Tim would cry. Bloody hands, day after day, hour after hour. Youth sports, a different kind of youth sports, but it changed his life. You look at some of the great manufacturing stories in this community, right? Going back to the Studebaker days, to the great companies being built today, somebody taught those guys and women something about trades that inspired them enough to say, I'm going to do that someday. I would say to you that if somebody here in this room or a group of you can get super excited and go after the youth in this community, you will transform this marketplace. And the popcorn kernels will pop like you've never seen them pop before. Third and finally, it's a commitment. This group of people, just like you've proven, have to be committed to see this through and see your community thrive like you've never committed before. Every time I have an all-American breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon, I'm reminded that the chicken was involved and the pig was committed. Yeah? So how do you and I get so committed to what's going to happen in this marketplace that the results don't matter? You talk to any of the entrepreneurs and the leaders who are going to be recognized very shortly here, and you say to them, what was your journey like? They'll tell you a lot of ups and downs. They'll tell you about sleepless nights. They'll tell you about days when they didn't know they were going to make it, but they were committed, and that's why they're about to walk on this stage very shortly. That's the third piece of it. So I'm going to leave you with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. Some of you have heard this. It's from a speech he made. And I share this with you because it's the picture in my mind of you, every single one of you, and those of you that will come around this initiative in the months and years to come. Some of you have been actively involved with it. Some of you may have been on the sidelines wondering, do I really need to play a role in this? This is for you. He made this speech on April 23rd, 1910. If I get a little emotional when I do this, it's two reasons. Number one, I get emotional about this. And number two, I'm doped up on flu medication. So it's one or the other, all right? So here's what Teddy Roosevelt said. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the one who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error or shortcomings, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So, South Bend, Notre Dame, Elkhart, St. Joseph County, whatever local brand you most associate with, I would just encourage you to know that your best days are ahead. Thank you.